Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Another crazy Karen gets into our first story, and of course, she decided to come to the restaurant after hours, and of course, knew the owner. Some things never change. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. I know the owner. What's his name again? This was many years ago when I worked in a restaurant right smack in the middle of Karen breeding ground. We had plenty of entitled a-holes come in, but this was definitely my favorite story. Quick side note about the owner. His parents started the restaurant back in the 90s, and he took over sometime in the late 2000s, I'm pretty sure. He's an avid social butterfly, so when we have customers claim to know the owner, to some extent, they kinda do. Now, this restaurant is only open for lunch, so we close at 4 p.m. So my boss, manager on duty, my coworker and I are just finishing up closing and about to walk out the door sometime between 4:30 and 4:45 when in strolls this woman and her adult son. We had the sign switched off, the lights were out, and it was a particularly dark day, but she just strolled on in, waving her arms around in that "look at me" and all the money dripping off me kind of way, talking about how she was so graciously introducing her son to our fabulous menu and how we serve that delicious signature item with the cranberries in it. Oh, you don't use cranberries? Well, you really should. She goes on like this for a minute or two, and I kid you not, as she's waving her arms around like the star of some unknown film noir, she pauses, arms outstretched, with her son recognizes as a cue, and he proceeds to take her big fur coat off for her. I mean, this lady had major Isma vibes for sure. Then she drops the ball. As she's telling us about that oh-so-necessary cranberry usage, she mentions that she should tell the owner herself. I know the owner, you know. What's his name again? Another side note, when the son took over, there had been only one restaurant in the part of town where people actually have the ungodly sums of money to back up their entitlement, but he actually expanded out. And now, in addition to the original store, there are 4 others, including the one where we're all witnessing this bizarre encounter. Buddy went into some of these stores with co-owners to help him cover the costs and manage the day-to-day needs of running 5 stores. My boss, the one acting as a manager that day, was one such co-owner. I'm sure you can imagine the disappointment when we had to inform this woman that we'd closed 30 minutes ago. Yes, we've always closed at this time. No, we can't get you anything to take with you as our computers are closed out and our kitchen staff left. And if you'd like to speak to the manager, the owner is right here. I will never understand how she managed to claim to know the owner and ask his name in the same breath, all while managing to keep up her femme fatale facade. And our second story. You don't want to help an elderly and injured person? Okay, fine by you. I work at an international airport as a check-in agent with a lot of lovely colleagues, supervisors, and coordinators. But there's always that one who's just, an a-hole. Just to give some necessary information, when the flight is fully booked, we allow people to check in their cabin baggage for free because there's not enough space in the overhead compartments in the aircraft for everyone's cabin baggage. This flight was not full. As I'm doing check-in, a certain elderly man with a cast on his left hand and a shaking right hand comes to my counter. I do the check-in, and he asks if we can take his cabin bag for free because he doesn't have the strength to carry it to the gate. I don't have the authority to do it on my own, but I'm feeling quite emphatic and want to ask my supervisor for clearance. I go to him. Mind you, he likes to put a stance, as always a POS to passengers and fellow agents, and explain to him that we should do it as human beings. He tells me that the gentleman has to pay 60 euros if he wants it to be done. I go to the elder gentleman and tell him that my supervisor is a POS who doesn't want to allow it. Of course, he's sad and tries to explain further how he can't do it because of his arms. I fully got the picture from the start. Even tries to hand me a 40 euro tip for doing it in desperation. Mind you, this gentleman is really old and really, really in not condition to carry any hand luggage. I refuse the money and tell him to sit and wait for my coworker to come with a wheelchair to drive him to the aircraft, literally to the door of the aircraft. Explain to him that at CDG, a man will wait for him to drive him in a wheelchair. Mind you, this happens at 60 minutes to takeoff. For passengers, this means 40 minutes. It takes time for a coworker to come and pick up this lovely gentleman. It takes time for everything, including the security check, passport control because he's in a wheelchair. The gentleman again offers me a €40 tip, and again I refuse because this is about understanding and being a human being. The coworker arrives, picks up the gentleman, gets his hand luggage, and off they go. Now here's the best part. Hours later, I get called into the office of my supervisor to explain why I called a wheelchair passenger so late, and I tell them the truth, because I have an understanding with him that I shall always tell the truth, and they would cover me. But this time it's different. This time the takeoff was late by 20 minutes. That's not a lot if you're a passenger, but it is if you work at an airport. I tell them that I judge the gentleman as fit to walk alone, but not carry his hand luggage, and thus had to call in a wheelchair service, and my supervisor ignored that despite having a look at the said gentleman. I even mentioned the possible €40 tip. I get praise for judgmental thinking and excused. The supervisor, on the other hand, he got so badly roasted to the point of being temporarily demoted to being a check-in agent with a warning of being fired because this was not his first, second, or third time causing a flight to be delayed. God, what a POS. Thank you for doing this and standing up for what's right. This is exactly what life is all about. And our next story. Try to convert me to veganism? Watch me eating meat. I have this one coworker who's a vegan. I don't have problems with vegans or vegetarians, but I hate people who try to convert others to veganism. They're on the same level as people who knock on your door and ask you if you want to talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So she's pretty annoyed when she gets her food for the break when there's something in the fridge which has meat in it. She berates the person about animal rights, that you don't need meat anymore, etc. It really annoys me and some other nurses. Oh yeah, we're all nurses. I do meal prep when I work days or nights, and I take breakfast with me when I work mornings. My girlfriend's vegetarian, so I eat meat maybe 1 or 2 times a week, but when I eat at work, it's maybe 2 or 3 times. I normally don't work with the vegan Nazi very often, and now, due to shortages, I work more shifts with her. And every time when I eat something with a bit of meat in it, she's scolding me. I tried to hide it with making sandwiches and wraps, etc., but every time when I eat something like that, she's always bugging me with what's in it, etc. Some days ago, I started my pettiness. In our break room, we got a big round table. We do our breaks in 2 groups so that the department is still manned. I make sure to always be in her break group. And for the last 5 days, I always ate meat dishes, and I made sure that I sat right in her field of vision. It effing annoys her that I sit opposite her, and I really enjoyed to cook my meals at home just for her annoyed looks. Here's something I ate. Chili con carne, my own fat guy sandwich, cheese, ham, bacon, and pastrami, a good old frikadelle, German for meatball sub, and one time I brought myself even a schnitzel. A buddy of mine who's totally on board, and since yesterday's, there are 2 nurses who sit opposite to her and eating our meat dishes. Like I said, she effing hates it and tries to avoid us after speaking up to us at first. But I always find a way to sneak into her break group. Sure, I'm a petty a-hole, but I'm a big fan of let people do their own stuff if they harm nobody else. That's my opinion on nearly everything. Let people make what they want. None of my business. In good old days, it was considered bad manners and definite lack of good upbringing to peer into others' plate. You don't like something that someone else is eating? Move to a different table or change your meal timings. But then again, we're talking of decent people. And our last story. I'm not paying you for your injury. Take it to court. Okay. Back when I was 20, I worked at a motorhome manufacturer. It was pretty small with around 20 people in total. I had to go at all aspects of the job before settling on the joinery shop where all the wood was cut by CNC machine and either prepped for the main workshop or pre-assembled where possible. Part of the prep work involved putting rubber edging into exposed edges of wood, and to do this you have to cut a groove into the edge for the edging to slot into. To put this groove in, we used a handheld router with a slotting bit, but the router was mounted under a workbench with the bit sticking out of a hole. As it was a handmade piece of equipment, it didn't have any safeguards on it, so you can probably see where this is going. I was slotting a large piece of ply when my hand slipped off the top and into the blade. When I pulled away and looked, I realized the tip of my middle finger was hanging off from about 3/4 the way down my nail, and my index and ring finger were badly cut too. I was alone in the joinery building, so had to go get help and lift to the hospital. Went to the hospital where they managed to reattach my finger minus the bone and took 5 weeks off work while I recovered. When I did return, it was with a plastic guard while the healing finished. About a week later, when the owner and I were both in, I just went to his office to talk. I had initially intended to just ask for my lost wages, which were about £1,200 at the time, but as soon as I entered and asked, "Can we talk?" I was immediately hit with, "If you're coming to ask for money, you can forget it. Go see a solicitor." Not even a, "How are you recovering? Are you okay?" etc. I tried to be rational, but he wasn't having any of it. So I did just that. Went to a no-win, no-fee lawyer, and after some back and forth was awarded $6,000. Beyond that, the HSE, Health and Safety Executive, paid a visit and found numerous risks and violations. Fire exits were blocked, first aid training was well out of date, wires were run across the floor to permanent workstations with no trip protection, etc. The owner got a thorough telling off and ordered to bring the safety standards in line with recommendations. This obviously led to a bad atmosphere at work, so I started looking for another job, which was for the best as the company went into administration after a mix of paying people to undertake the required changes and the motorhome market taking a wobble. I was made redundant, but at least received redundancy pay from HMRC and walked into another job that following week. The owner declared bankruptcy and tried to reopen under a different company name and under someone else's name, his wife, I think. But as far as I've heard, nothing came of it. You should send him a postcard that said, "I only wanted £1,200. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.